glad to have you back for lunch. My name's Nicole, again, Director of the College Center for Research and Fellowships, and it's my privilege and pleasure to be up here with a number of your upper class peers who we've invited to actually share a little bit about their experience and how they took advantage and navigated the University of Chicago. Again, because we're a small group, this gives us a chance to actually take questions throughout lunch from all of you. So don't be shy. At any point, if you just want to interrupt or raise your hand or stand up and ask a question, please do. So we'll spend about an hour or so talking with all of you and having them share some of their insights. So we'll start with introductions first. Let's start at the end. Tyler, if you could introduce yourself, your major, and one thing you wish you had known as a second year or taken advantage of sooner.
Okay, so once again, I'm Tyler. Thank you, Nicole, for the introduction. I'm a fourth year in the college studying neuroscience. That's my major, so I'm very interested in brain diseases, neurodegeneration, how the brain operates on a mechanistic level. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, so I'm an international student, so I'd be more than happy to talk to any international students about any inquiries specific to that. If I had to give you any advice that I wish I knew, as a second year, it would probably be that despite the fact that you're likely in very rigorous classes and busy, as you are second years, to take some time out of your lives to reflect about why it is that you're really pursuing the activities you're doing, what motivates you, and take some time to reflect about that. And also try to begin to think about what really matters to you in life. And by that I mean, are there any challenges or things about the world that you draw attention with? Are there things that are happening in the world that you would like to see change? Or are there things you would like to invest your time in to be able to improve the communities or the world around you in a certain way? And try to look out and read a lot, read broadly, and think about how you want to have an impact on the world, and try to draw the experiences that you've already pursued and researched throughout the college and beyond, to tie together slowly a broader thematic around maybe one or two domains to think about, the great problems of the world and how you want to tackle those. So that's kind of what I would say, to think about and reflect. Despite being overloaded with labs and P-sets and all that kind of stuff.
Hey, good afternoon. My name's Sarah. I am a fourth year global studies major. Specifically, I look at global health and how we can take lessons from sub-Saharan Africa and their epidemic, and with HIV specifically, and apply them to Western countries. I am a military brat, so I'm not from anywhere, but that gives me a little bit of an interesting perspective. And I think the one piece of advice I wish I had gotten second year was, as long as you are finding mentors, that's great, but also make sure you find advocates, right? So I've really benefited from people in the college, whether that's professors or bosses, who gave me an idea of what it would be like to work in that field. But I've benefited even more from people who were willing to go to bat for me, who would stick up for me in application processes, who would, sit down and offer me guidance that was incredibly personal outside of what I was going to do professionally, and where I could leverage my strengths and who I was as a person to get where I wanted to go, either in a very professional domain or in a more personal one. So make sure you find both and know the difference between them.
Hi everyone, my name's Andrew. I am also a fourth year from Toronto. I'm a fundamentals issues and texts major, and my question is, what are the affects of kinship? So I'm primarily interested in the idea of the family and social groups, and also social feeling. My piece of advice is do not forget your body. I came in as an athlete, so I was working out 25 hours a week, and we had practice at 6 a.m. 3 or 4 days a week. So I was technically really healthy and fit, but also living on the verge of death because my body couldn't handle that. And then I stopped, and I went the other way. And now I'm kind of in the middle and kind of staying healthy. So that's my advice.
Hey everyone, I'm Logan. I'm a third year in the college. I major in biology, planning to specialize in cancer biology, and I do research. I look at small peptide therapies for treating hematological pediatric cancers at the hospital. I really enjoy that. And my piece of advice for you would be that it's okay to say no sometimes. So I think as UChicago undergraduates, it's our nature to get over-involved and to overcommit. But sometimes you just need to take some very intentional time to reflect on what is really important to you, as Tyler mentioned, and kind of cut back if necessary, because sometimes we can just try and sign up for everything, sign up for every list host, say yes to every person who asks you to help them with something, but it's okay to be more intentional about what you choose to do and what you choose not to do. So that's the biggest piece of advice that I wish I would have known around second year.
Hi guys, I'm Angela. I'm a third year from the Chicago suburbs, political science major, cinema and media studies minor, and also a Dugan Scholar, so that's like the certificate program through Booth. In my piece of advice that I wish I would have known kind of starting second year was that it's great to like be super involved and think really critically like about your classes, about things you're doing, about what you want to do, and it's also okay to be like 19, 20, like hit pause on something and like take a second for yourself, for your friends, and to just kind of like realize that like you're doing really well, like regardless of what you're doing, like you're here doing it, so congratulations to you, and that it's okay to just kind of like not know for a minute and kind of like take a breather, and like invest time in relationships and friends that like really build you up rather than those that kind of like make you feel like you have to be doing one thing or have to be looking to the future. It's okay to just kind of like take a second and realize where you are.
My name's Kate. I'm a fourth year in the college, majoring in linguistics, and I've been spending a lot of time looking at the language of law, specifically related to linguistics. And I was going to talk about relationships as my advice as a second year, so now I'm not. And I guess that then takes me to another idea is you're second years, so you're only barely just 1/4 of the way through college, which I remember when I was a second year, I was like, I have no more time left. You have so much more time left. And so you still have plenty of time to take chances, take risks, and see like what road it goes down. I'm still a fourth year and I still have time to take chances and pass graduation, but sometimes the road it takes you down will be absolutely horrible, but that's okay, you learn something, but sometimes the road will be great. So just don't be afraid to take a random risk. It can be fun.
Hi, I'm Breck. I'm a fourth year in the college majoring in religious studies and history. I'm writing my thesis on apocalypse thinking in Chicago in the 1890s. Which is really fun, so ask me about it later. But my advice would be to go to office hours and get to know your professors, because if you show them that you care in office hours, first of all, they'll give you really good ideas, but they'll also probably be a little bit kinder when grading you. And related to that is get to know your TAs and grad students. They work really hard and they care about you, but also they understand where you are right now because they're in a similar place. And so that oftentimes I find that they're really willing to sit down with you and talk about your project and then talk about their project, which is often really interesting.
So kind of building on that, actually, Tyler, if we could go back down to you.
Sure,
Could you tell us, and each of you respond to this, kind of how and when you began to build relationships with faculty and why it's been so important for your experience at UChicago?
Right, so a lot of the panelists already talked about this, but building relationships with faculty is instrumental to your experience in college. You know, you're spending lots of time with the students, and that's obviously great resources, but the faculty member are just amazing at the school, and it's really a shame if you're not able to take advantage of those office hours to get to know them. Me personally, in terms of getting to know faculty, I definitely went to office hours my first 2 years, but really when I really got the opportunity to build these relationships was probably third year. So I had the opportunity to study abroad in Paris, which was a great opportunity. I fully recommend you guys to take advantage of study abroad if you have the opportunity to, and the time slot in your schedule. But it really enables you to build a close connection with those faculty members because you're in such a small class with them. And so for me, that was with a professor in the neurobiology department. And so that was, in the fall of my third year, the first opportunity where I really got to know a professor very well in that context. And because I was able to engage in conversations with them in that close level, that relationship turned into an actual project, which would be my thesis, my undergraduate thesis. And so now we meet weekly, one-on-one, to talk about our research for an hour, and we nitpick what I've written, we nitpick the project I'm doing, and so it's literally been one of the most academically, personally rewarding experiences, I would say probably, in my whole life. So really try to invest in those relationships with faculty. They're life-changing, and yeah.
Nicole, I don't think you're going to like my answer very much.
You should be honest, Sarah. Absolutely.
So I took a little bit of a different route. My major connections with faculty exist in faculty who don't teach at the University of Chicago. So my two closest mentors are actually at the University College London and Glasgow Caledonian University in Glasgow, Scotland. And the way I managed to make those relationships is there is a lot of research money at this school. Like, you would be surprised how easy it is to apply for some of this money. And I was awarded a grant from Study Abroad to do research I wanted to do, and some questions I had about what was going on in South Africa with some international development work. And I basically emailed the professor I had a very tenuous connection to some friends that were studying in London, and said, hey, you don't know me, but I do have $8,000 to spare, and I am willing to work for you. What do you think about that? People are willing to accept if you go out of your comfort zone. And I've had that experience, working abroad, but it is just as true here at the University of Chicago, that when you come forward with an idea or with an interest, or really just with two able hands and a brain, and you're willing to commit to working on something and to being present in that research space, people are very responsive to that, and they will respond really well and, build you up and also let you build up experiences.
Oh boy. So my fundamentals junior paper is on affect and kinship in Monique Truong's 2003 novel, The Book of Salt, specifically relating to Lauren Berland's cruel optimism. So Lauren Berland is a professor here in the English department. She is incredible. I have her now with Breck in a class. But when I started this project, I was absolutely not prepared to go ask her to be my advisor for it. Luckily, she was on sabbatical, so I couldn't even do that. But now I'm in her class, and we talk about her work sometimes, and we read her work in class because she's that important. So I'm just starting to build this relationship because her work is the single most important thing in my academic career. And she's a lot nicer than I thought she would be, and thank goodness, so good luck to me.
Yeah, so I guess my connections with faculty also didn't come until later on. I'm a STEM major, so during my first year I had a lot of large lecture classes in my STEM classes, and I found it kind of difficult to make connections with my faculty because I might seem extroverted in some contexts, but I'm typically a pretty introverted person, and so it was difficult for me to kind of cross that barrier from being just a student in the class to someone who had a personal connection with the professor. But I found once I started to take some of my upper level electives in my major, so my biology courses, the class sizes became a lot smaller, and the faculty were a lot more engaged with the students and were able to kind of talk with us one-on-one before and after class, just even small talk that we would have about what else was going in our lives besides biology. And I found that was the best way for me to make connections with professors. And so I think I would just suggest to be patient. Definitely don't push it off until the last minute, but it's okay if you're in a bunch of large classes and it's a bit overwhelming for you and you feel like you can't really connect with these faculty one-on-one. Obviously office hours is a great way to approach that, but it's also okay to just wait for those classes that truly speak to you, and then also those professors will be able to write you such a strong letter because they're in your field of interest, which is what I found. So I had a class last spring with literally 4 students in it, and I became really close with the professor because we were able to just talk so much since there was such a small student number in that class, and I thought that was such a great way for me to kind of engage with the faculty without the intimidation of such a large lecture.
I would say for me, something that's been kind of helpful is just, like, I haven't always known specifically, like, okay, I want to take this class because I have this very specific interest or something, but I've used my classes as kind of a way to, like, parse down those interests. And I think, like, a good tip would just be, like, if something sounds like maybe, like, broader or vaguely interesting to you, like, kind of getting involved with that. And then I've used my professors from there to be like, okay, what am I actually interested in? Like, kind of gaining, like, coming in really just kind of like a sponge, like ready to take in all the information and then being like, oh, this is what really appeals to me. And you'll find that, you know, like throughout the course or whatever, that maybe you develop a few questions of your own then that you can take with you and continue to pursue academically. That's kind of been my strategy, because I didn't come in, even to the poli-sci major, like really with anything in particular that I like wanted to hone in on. But, you know, like in taking a few larger classes, going to some office hours, like getting to know my TAs, I think those relationships have been really helpful in like hearing like what they're working on and what they're interested in, and then kind of like process of elimination from there, because you won't always know, right? But I think that there is so much cool stuff that goes on, like with professors, with TAs, like with research and everything, that the more you can just be willing to like listen and kind of be open to like all the great work that like professors and stuff are doing, the more you'll be able to like form really great relationships and then kind of be able to ask like good questions. And then maybe those are people that then, you know, you're close with and can like write you a letter of recommendation or kind of help guide you even like further in your studies or in your career.
So this actually goes back to the whole idea of taking chances. I formed my first sort of relationship with a professor my second year, or the beginnings of it, because at the end of the class he was like, I usually hire 1 or 2 RAs, and I was so woefully unqualified, but I was like, ooh, me, anyway, because I was like, what do I have to lose? And then I was his RA over the summer, and I'm still his RA. So I got super lucky by taking that chance. But in general, look for the professors or the people you come across that you like, because those are the people you're going to be able to form the best connection with, not necessarily the person who might fit ideally the person that you want to follow or your career path. Because if you ultimately can't form a connection with them, there's a point to it, but it's a different kind of connection. So look for the people that you click with, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a professor. That can be people you come across at work, etc. And so it doesn't have to be the one teaching you. It's nice if it coincides, but you can get both.
I love office hours. I go to office hours all the time. People have to, like, other students will be like, we've been waiting for 20 minutes, you need to leave. But part of that's because I like to talk to my professors about themselves as well, and I think that's a really good way to build relationships. They're human beings too, and it's very dehumanizing to sit in office hours and have students come for 15 minutes and talk about their papers and then leave like frightened rabbits. So the most like personal relationship I have with a faculty member is probably Jane Daly, who owns the soccer dog, who plays like soccer on the quad, and that's because we talk about our like foster dogs and Cora, and so we're able to have like more of a natural relationship, and that helps me feel more comfortable in her office hours when she starts like critiquing my papers very strongly, because that's how she is as a person. I also got to echo, Lauren Berlant is amazing, and if you have a chance to take a class with her, that'd be incredible. But again, going back to like grad students and TAs, I'm now like actually friends with the person who was my writing intern, first quarter of Hume, and I've since taken a class with her, and she's now faculty at a different college. But it's one of the most rewarding experiences I've had at the university, and it's like a lifelong relationship now, just because we would sit and talk about our own work and our own lives. And so I highly encourage you, if you're a little intimidated to talk to professors, to talk to your grad students, because they're nice.
While we're breaking between courses, does anyone have any questions yet at this point for the panel? Anyone want to brave the room? Staff? Back there in the corner? No? Okay. Like I said, we're up here to take questions as well throughout the hour. So again, Tyler, we'll go back down to the other end. Could you talk a little bit about when you started to feel comfortable or know that you were in the right major? And if that was something you knew coming in, was there a point at which you shifted? I kind of know the answer to this question, so it's not fair, but could you start, and then if we could work down working with that question.
Right, so this kind of ties into a little bit about what you guys talked about, not necessarily going with a professor that fits exactly the subject or academic or personal node, but just going with someone that you may have a connection with. And actually, so the professor that I ended up working with, so Peggy Mason in the neurobiology department, we just very much connected on a personal level through study abroad. And so before then, I had, as I said, been very much, and still am, very much interested in brain diseases. So how Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, multiple sclerosis, things like that, and how they work at a mechanistic level, but what the biology is behind those diseases. But interacting with Peggy gave me a different perspective, a different lens to look at neurobiology, neurology, and that was the lens of a humanist. The lens of a thinker, of not just a scientist, but someone who studies the human body and human interactions, on a humanistic social science level. And so interactions with her kind of brought into my mind different modes of thinking, including from anthropology, history, So I started becoming interested in not just the biology of brain diseases, but the history of neurology. And so that's when I became more interested in actually the history and philosophy of science, technology, and medicine. So I would say now, as a fourth year, so I kind of had that change from the biology of neuroscience, the history of neuroscience in my third year. I'd say now I'm kind of pretty firmly interested in the history of science and using that alternate perspective. So the point being is this, you'll have your interest, in your second year, but as you grow, be open-minded to different perspectives, from different faculty members, from friends, and be open to the fact that your interests and the way you look at the world might change, and that actually might be beneficial for you, and ultimately what you want to pursue in your life. So yeah, being open-minded.
I'm going to make like 16 plugs for the global studies major throughout this entire 2-second answer. Please join the global studies major. We're an excellent major. We don't have enough people. There's 17 in my year. I got started in the global studies major because it was going to let me study a language intensively, and I had some vague idea that I was going to go running off to a foreign country and fight diseases, and maybe I should learn French because of that, which isn't a great reason to get involved with a major. I think what I have learned this entire process, because global studies is this very much build your own major, we have a much more open course list than a lot of majors do, was kind of the idea that your major is important, but it is more important the people you're going to meet through it. So, as a small department, I've had really invested interest from the head of the program, from our program administrator in, am I getting enough funding for my research? Do I have, the funds I need to graduate on time? How can they help me? And a big part of knowing I was in the right major for me was when I started writing my thesis, weirdly last year, which is a long story. But kind of in the thesis writing process, getting to have these connections to all of these different professors who were very invested in what our group of 17 students was going to do. And also these very different students who were not studying anything like me. That we had the range of my politicization of HIV in South Africa to Argentine history to couscous. But to have everyone in the room who was very committed to wanting to learn from each other and wanting to be a better writer because we were in this room with each other. So your major pick is important. I'm not going to say it's not important. For those of you who are going into something highly quantitative, it is even more important than what I chose. But also recognize that it is the people you're going to meet through the major. You're not going to make a wrong decision. Whatever major you pick will be the right major for you because it will afford you different opportunities than if you had picked sociology or if you had picked political science. And be open to those opportunities even if they weren't in the forms you thought they were going to be.
So I'm a fundies major, have you heard? Which is the do whatever the hell you want major. So how did I end up a fundies major? My good friend who I met first year, her name is Rachel. She was a year above me. She was also a fundamentals major. She also has my job in an RSO from last year, so I've basically taken after her. She just kind of got me into it, and how I knew that ended up being right for me. I'm into close readings. That's it. That's what we did in Soc first year. My professor would turn to a page, say, read this paragraph, what does this mean? And that's still how I read books. and that's still how I like classes to be taught, and that's how fundamentals classes are taught. So that's pretty much how it worked for me. I'm lucky. You do have to apply to be a fundamentals major spring of your first year, and when I met with the chair to like talk about my application, she was like, "Oh, I know who you are. Rachel talks about you all the time. Like, you sound really interesting. This essay you submitted is really cool." And like, yay. So, lucky me.
So as I mentioned, I'm a biology major, and a lot of people assume that that means that I'm also pre-med, since a large proportion of biology majors are pre-med, but I'm not. So just put that out there. So I've kind of felt like I had to find my sense of belonging in this major outside of the classroom by pursuing research. So when I was in high school, I was lucky to be exposed to a research program where I did 2 projects before I graduated. It was a lot of fun, but I kind of started to doubt whether or not working like in a wet lab was right for me. I had always thought I wanted to solve these big questions like what's the cure to cancer, and so when I came to college, I immediately jumped on an opportunity to work in a cancer biology lab. So I worked as a lab technician during my first year, and it was fun. I enjoyed the people who worked there, and I basically did the same thing over and over again, and I got very good at extracting DNA from mouse tails and doing PCR and then running gel electrophoresis. But that's all that I did. And I started to realize that the work I was doing wasn't really having much of an impact, and so I decided to leave that lab, and I took the next year off of research. Actually, my second year, I didn't do any research whatsoever, didn't walk into a lab at all, but I started to kind of like look around, just open my eyes to what was available at the university, and I started to realize all of the cool clinical biology research that was happening related to cancer biology, and so I started meeting with faculty. A lot of them ended up being MD PhDs, which means that they have both those degrees and see patients in the hospital, but also maintain research laboratories on campus. And I thought it was so cool that their work was so grounded in their patients that they were seeing in the hospital. And I kind of jumped on an opportunity after thinking very carefully about it to work in a new laboratory. And I also placed high importance on the people, and I realized that the people in the lab, from the few interactions that I had with them, made it very clear that they were invested in my success as a student and as a researcher. And so this past summer, I worked full-time in this laboratory, and I absolutely loved it, not only because of the work and how it was grounded in clinical research, but also because of the people who were there and who were willing to support me in all of my projects and pick me up when I was down. And so I think it's like kind of a weird answer to the question, but I've kind of found my sense of belonging through my involvement in research outside of the classroom, and that kind of reassures me that yes, like most people who do the biology major here want to go on and get their MD, but for me, I take another route, and that's fine because I feel supported in what I'm doing because of the people that I work with.
I came into college kind of generally knowing what I wanted to do professionally, but no idea how to manifest that academically. So I always had like kind of a business mindset. I was never great with numbers, so I thought more like, corporate consulting. So I was like, okay, econ major. And that was not the answer. So all of my first year, I had like a lot of core to do. So stuck with that and kind of was surrounded by these like econ finance people, and very much thought that I would go into the econ major second year, like the 200 sequence. Business econ did not exist for me. But I kind of saw myself struggling in calculus, which is a huge component of the econ major, and just, I took 198 and didn't really fit. I didn't want to be spending all of my like class time and all of the time I'd have to spend, doing homework and kind of things outside of class like on that subject matter, but I thought, okay, this is I was made to think it was the only way to get where I wanted to be professionally. So when I came kind of start of my second year, I did not, reach like the calculus threshold that you had to reach to actually like go through with the econ major. So I was at this like really critical point of like, oh my God, I'm like totally gonna fail. I was like, I have no major, I'm not gonna be able to work in business. It was a whole thing, but it was all fixed after I took Intro to American Politics all of my second year. That may not be the answer for you, but you will find something similar. just like depending on your like interests. But I took that class just kind of thinking, okay, you got to start somewhere. And I really liked APUSH in high school, so that's why I took Intro to AMPOL. And it was a fantastic class, and I got close with the professor, and it started to like really parse down my interests, and I looked further into the poli-sci major, kind of got really into it with an intense poli-sci elective with Professor Rosenberg, who's fantastic, winter of my second year, and that kind of like solidified for me like, okay, poli-sci is the path I want to go down. And then I began to like from there surround myself with people that also like encouraged me and reassured me that like, you know, poli-sci is what I wanted to spend my time on academically. Like this is what I was passionate about. This is what I wanted to write papers about and read about. But I could still pursue career interests outside of that and kind of just use the major as like, you know, a framework to think, and I think like that's been really valuable. So I would say like no matter where you're at with like thinking about your major, like get involved with something that you're like, that sounds cool, and like things will start to line up, because as long as you can like maintain like integrity of what you're interested in, like that will manifest.
I sort of just fell into my major. I still sometimes wonder how I'm a linguistics major, and I've had people look at me and they're like, why are you a linguistics major? But I love it. A huge portion or a huge factor in my major decision, I was like, what majors exist where I don't have to take calculus at all, and you can graduate without ever having taken calculus here. I'm doing it, I hope. But it was more of a matter of I just started taking classes I liked, and sort of realized that I was taking Arabic, and then I took this introduction to linguistics class, and I was like, that's why I don't distinguish between the words P-E-N and P-I-N. They sound the same to me, but now I learned why. And so I just kept taking classes I liked, and then realized I had a major out of it. So just following what she said, just take what you like. You're in a bubble-ish area right now where all you get to do is pursue your passions, or figure out what your passions are and what your passions are not. That was also a huge factor. And then you'll find a major, even if it's in your third year. It'll be fine. It'll be great.
I kind of have an opposite trajectory. I came in as religious studies and have just stayed that way. And I also thought I was going to be a different major, but then second quarter of my first year, at the end, a professor, she called me and she's like, are you a history major? Because you should be a history major. And then she scared me a lot, so I said, yeah, I'm a history major now. And so I've been a history major since, and they both offer very different things, because if you think 17 is small, religious studies has 4 in my year, which means that I know the head of the department really well, but most importantly, it means that it's totally subsumed in the divinity school. So I've taken several graduate classes, and I've been in 3 or 4 classes where I'm the only undergraduate, which is a very different experience and pushes you in ways that are incredible. Like I remember second year I showed up to a class and this man was like, I have 3 children and 4 foster children. And I said, wow, we're at such different life stages taking the same class, which was great. And then history is a little bit different because it's a pretty large major, but it's so nurturing and wonderful, and that's why I ended up choosing it over the unnamed other major, that I would walk into my professor's offices and just feel at home, and everyone was so supportive, and the other students care about you so much, and it's not competitive. Everyone just likes hearing about what you're doing. So yeah, plug for both those majors. There's a lot of freedom in both of them, and I would encourage you to look at some of the smaller majors, particularly if you're interested in getting a lot of personalized attention, or taking classes at the graduate level, because a lot of the small majors allow you to do that.
Question check. Anybody in the audience? Mouthful. No. Tyler, back down again to you. Could, if you don't mind, this is a little bit kind of off script.
Okay.
Could you offer some reflections on maybe one thing you found really challenging about the University of Chicago and how you overcame that challenge?
How I overcame that challenge. I think, and I'm going to be very transparent and candid right now. I think, and I'm not sure if this is true at other schools because I've never been to another undergraduate institution. This is all I know at the University of Chicago. But I feel like there's, and I think this is true for not just students in STEM, also students in other fields as well, but there seems to be this pervasive pressure to know what you want to do after college. And this idea that you need to have this 10, 15-year plan starting from your first year going, to when you're 30 about, you're going to pursue a PhD in molecular biology, and then you're going to do an MD, and then you're going to become a clinical professor, or you're going to go to Goldman Sachs, you're going to be in a private equity department for 3 years, and after you're going to be a consultant for McKinsey maybe, and start off your own startup. Or maybe you're going to go and do a PhD at Cambridge studying art history, and then you'll be a faculty member, at Harvard teaching, I don't know, diplomacy or literary studies, and that you have to have all those things figured out as a first or second year, and they have to be crystal clear in your mind, and you have to have everything ready, to launch yourself after your years in college, because if not, then, things are not the way that, then there'll be an issue. But that should not be the case at all. You're all growing, and I am too. And so I think that's one challenge I've been having. And I think a good idea is, and this comes back to what I was saying earlier, but really being open-minded about the world around you, the people, having candid conversations with your peers and your faculty members, and I kind of talked about this earlier, but really reading broadly. And what I mean by read broadly, I don't mean just books, articles online, subscribe to New York Times, Wall Street Journal, or different op-eds, New Yorker, and just read about what's going on in the world. And that might really be, and think about it too. Don't just read and have the words go through your mind. Really reflect about what you're reading and how that interacts with your values, and that'll really be able to help you inform you with regard to what matters to you and help you grow as a person. So really focus on that instead of having a fixed mindset with regard to the steps of your career, but rather the person you want to become in the world.
Academia is super sexist. That's going to be like my opening line here. The University of Chicago is a great institution. I'm glad that I've been here. I'm glad my degree will be from here. That does not mean that I have not encountered sexism while here. And I think being very open and open-minded about the spaces you are in, the spaces you are allowed to be in, and what is said to you while you are there is something that is incredibly helpful for your personal development, but also for your resilience. So I was very conscious at the beginning of my research career that I was going to seek out female mentors who could specifically speak to what my concerns were going to be going to grad school, thinking further ahead about where I wanted my life to go, but who also were going to know what it felt like when I sat down in a room and I had someone infer that I was going to derail my career if I ever fell in love, which has been a comment directed at me. Always be very conscious of the spaces you're in, and especially if you are white, if you are, the gender majority in the room, be very conscious of looking around and recognizing that, right? There are times where I've sat a panel where I've been the only woman on the panel, and none of the people on the panel have been people of color. And being able to recognize that and call it out when you see it, because it will not get better unless you start talking about it.
So last spring, I had the time-old problem of I was doing too much and couldn't really function, and that was very unhealthy. So I went into summer, and I was already thinking about the fall and how I was going to manage all of the same things and more, because there was more that I wanted to do. Coming into fourth year, it's your last year. And you're like trying to set yourself up for the best possible outcome coming into fourth year. And then I worked for the place I work now. It's called Agro Chicago. It's a trauma healing nonprofit in the South Side founded on yogic principles, which is a lot of balance. So this is why I talk about the body all the time. And I literally spent the summer healing and in peace circles. And if anyone who's been around me, I'll talk about grandmother Susan, who's this half Mohawk, half Hawaiian healer who came this summer and just showed up, bangs her drum, tells stories about how dogs used to fly and like how her town has no center because they took the school out of the town and just like moved it to another town. And that like kind of brought me back into the world of like, what are the things that matter on the ground in your daily life and like getting out of the world. And so that means like, no, I like didn't have to have 2 campus jobs because like, just like putting another thing on the resume didn't matter. And I kind of like broke out of that cycle. And now, well, I'm doing a lot better. So that was my challenge and progress so far.
Yeah, so I guess my experience can be summed up in the phrase, rejections are hard. So you will encounter rejection. You probably already have. Odds are you didn't get accepted to every college that you got admitted to. And that's okay. Like, it's okay. You're going to be fine. I can't tell you like how many internships, fellowships, scholarships, everything in between that I've gotten rejected from. And it took a toll on me because it just seemed like they all were coming in at the same time and nothing was happening, and that's totally fine. It's going to happen. You just need to reassure yourself that like you are enough. Like, you being here at this institution is an extremely amazing accomplishment that not many people can say they've achieved. And so just being here and getting by day to day is amazing and incredible and admirable. And so don't get down on yourself. It's okay if you're not going to get a fellowship while you're at this university. It's okay if you don't get that internship that everybody wanted. That's totally fine. Everything will turn out in the end. Yeah, so just keep your head up.
I guess kind of similarly, the greatest challenge I faced, and I feel like it kind of like culminated fall of my second year, was feeling like I had to run someone else's race instead of my own. So if I wanted to have, you know, any sort of success, I had to do it how the person next to me was doing it. Like had to have like a 4.0 in the econ major, like in the blue chips. Like, no, like everyone's different kind of path is right for them. And I think that was something that it took me a really long time to not so much even like recognize, but to reconcile, like within myself, like to feel like, okay, if I'm happy with what I'm doing, or if I'm finding like meaning out of this, even though it may not look like it, you know, it fits perfectly on the path, or like it's not on the traditional list of boxes I have to check, like there are no boxes. Like you just have to do what you want to be doing, like what you're passionate about, like what you're enjoying on kind of like a day-to-day, quarter-to-quarter basis. And then from there, like that defines success for you. It's not defined by, you know, attaining it in a way that like other people are. Sometimes, and I think that can be challenging because like sometimes success in certain things looks a certain way, but it doesn't have to, right? I think like the biggest thing can be just kind of like I said earlier, like taking a second, being like, here's where I am, and like, you know what, like I'm deciding to feel good about it.
I think one of the biggest things that I've struggled with in general is just the constant exhaustion that you experience as a college student. You're always tired. It's like what Andrew was saying, how he ended up dropping his sport. Well, I didn't do that, and I wake up at 5 like far too often, and it's exhausting, and sometimes it just leads to a terrible day or a terrible week. Last week, I ran into Nick, actually, and he's like, how you doing? And I had just spilled coffee all over myself, so my caffeine was gone, I was wet, and I was like, I'm doing great. My whole cup of coffee's all over me. It's just awesome. I think it's a metaphor for the whole quarter. And he's like, all right. But it's just, find your people, because you're going to be tired. You're going to have sucky weeks, quarters, months. But so are other people. And it can all be better if you just find your support system. And also find your thing. I don't know if anyone's in Renee Granville Grossman East, but Larry and Kathy, they have their resident dean teas every Friday. I go every single Friday. If I've had the worst week in the world, I show up at tea and I have a warm cup of like, and then pastries, and it's like, okay, week's over, it's fine. If I've had an amazing week, I show up and I'm like, now my week's even better, going into the weekend. And also just remember that in the end, what actually matters is how you're a friend to someone else, your relationships with your family, your relationships with yourself, and your GPA will only be a number. And so if you get exhausted and overly stressed, just remember about like actually who you want to be, and then a number doesn't define you, a class doesn't define you. How one professor thinks of you doesn't define you. It's how you like want to be. Go to the T's if you have tea, or your metaphor.
This is a very hard question for me to answer, and I've had all this time to think about it, and I still don't know what I'm going to say. But I think hard for me has been the fact that a lot of people at the university and a lot of people who run the university haven't had the experiences I've had. And so when I I don't know, I just find it hard to be a person sometimes here with my own experiences, particularly I'm from North Carolina, I went to a public school, didn't have the footing coming in here that a lot of people had, and now I come from a not well-off family, and I think that's been hard to deal with here in particular, feeling like there's no one here like me, or no one here who understands what I've been through. But then that gets better every time I talk to people outside of classes, and I make friends with someone who's in a totally different major, and we don't talk about school, we just talk about cooking, or go to pub trivia or whatever. I run the comedy magazine here, and so when I go there, it doesn't really matter how horrible my week has been. I become a funny person, and so I really enjoy that. But it's also been horrible and miserable at many times. But I also don't think I would have been happy anywhere else either. So it's been a complicated 4 years.
So yeah, good question. Sure.
Yeah, were you gonna prompt for questions?
No, go ahead. Absolutely. Just go ahead and ask the question.
I was just with the whole panel, yes, or yeah. So some of your answers to previous questions that touched on this. I guess a question I was gonna ask is pertains to how I think life at the university here can be very insular, which is how academic it is by nature, but the whole culture here, and it creates just an environment that can be, I think, somewhat socially stifling on certain levels. And I guess just in your experience here, what would your advice be on how to thrive socially at the university?
You want to start with that?
So I can talk about that. I think there's no cookie cutter answer because everyone's different, right? What my social life might be very different from Andrew's social life, or Breck's social life, or Logan's social life. But I think balance is key, so balancing your academics and your social life. I think, for me personally, if you want to be really candid, I, in my first year, had a lot of friends in different classes, so that was kind of my social life through the classes I took. I made friends in general chemistry, things like that. But in my second year, I realized that I was really close to a lot of friends on lots of sports teams. So I play hockey at UChicago as a Canadian. So a lot of my friends were on the hockey team, and so actually a lot of them were also in a fraternity. So I ended up rushing a fraternity, and that was a lot of fun for me. So for you, finding maybe a group of guys or girls that you really hang out with in terms of athletics or arts maybe, or RSOs, having really community where you can kind of share a common interest, and that would be the kind of the core of your relationship. So yeah, be involved with RSOs.
Get off campus. Just leave. Do something. And that can take a lot of different forms depending on how social you want to be as a person, right? I tend to get fairly exhausted when I'm around people. If it gets to the weekend, I don't want to talk to anyone. I want to be alone. But be alone off campus, or be doing something with people off campus. And that can be, you want to walk to the lake and take 30 minutes of just you time, and don't have your phone on, don't think about classes, just have that for yourself. Do that. You will be a healthier person when you come back. If that is volunteering, that you want to find some sort of purpose outside of your classes, outside of your RSO, that you're not going to be graded on, but that will make you feel personally fulfilled, that's a really good social life too, because you will meet people with wildly different perspectives. My most meaningful social engagements have come in the south side of Chicago with people unaffiliated with the university, because there's such a different way of thinking about what matters in life, where they want to be in their lives, what they want to be doing in 5 years. And if you get the opportunity to travel, right? I've taken a couple of weekends where it's just I'm going to go back and see my family. That's the rest and recharge I need. Or I'm going to take the weekend to go see friends at another school. there's that kind of like always fear of missing out of something that's going on campus. It's a busy place. You will always be missing out on something. Just figure out what you're going to be able to do that will give you kind of the recharge to jump back into classes, RSOs, whatever is required of you here on campus to get to that next step. Because if you can't pour from an empty cup. If you don't feel that you are fulfilled as a person, you're not going to be able to go anywhere else.
So I came in as an athlete, as a swimmer, and the swim team is like very close because we're big and we're actually co-ed. So that was like a huge group of people that I got to know, and like just you like become automatically friends, even if you're like don't really like each other. And then I've stopped. My roommate, one of them is also actually an ex-swimmer in the same year, so we're really close. All of my friends come from just like slightly different things that I've done, so I don't like have a like solid group of friends, which kind of makes it hard because it's like we don't really like spend time like collectively together, or I find myself telling the same stories about my life 15 times, which compounded with the fact that I'm a compulsive oversharer, like doesn't go well. So like just like being social is really hard when you're busy all day and you like sit in class and you can't talk. And if I ever have class with my friends, I talk all the time and they hate me. So I don't know. Like that's really my answer is I still don't really know how to be friends with people. And my most meaningful friendships are the ones that I've had to like work really, really hard for. And the people who like I kind of get in fights with every once in a while. And it's like, actually, we're going to step back and fix this every single time we get in a fight because we matter so much to each other. They've gotten me here, like, to where I am, that I can say all these crazy things and, like, not face repercussions. So there's that. Just, like, you can be friends with one person. You can be friends with 2 people. I often joke that I have 4 friends. Which is like not true at all, but also is true. So there you go. That didn't help anyone.
No, I actually totally agree. I think, I mean, it's cliche, but quality over quantity is like really important because for me, my first year, I got really, 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 really close with my roommate, and because of that, I felt like I couldn't look beyond that to find other connections with people. And then when I wasn't living with that roommate anymore, I started just looking around and finding which people I vibed with, and it ended up being a lot of people in my house. I got super close. I would just like hang out in the lounge a lot, be at the house table, and I really just kind of began to appreciate the housing system. And now I'm an RA, and I have a new community in my new dorm, which I really appreciate. But I've never really had like one friend group. It's always been just like individual connections that I maintain with people, and I think that that's been a great way for me to kind of. It's like it sounds kind of like scientific, but like compartmentalizing like my different needs, I guess. Like, cause I feel like I have like friends who I can go to for certain things, and then I have other friends who I can confide in for other things because we have these different shared experiences. Because you are a multifaceted person, so yeah, it's kind of weird, but I feel like I have just these really strong but like few connections that I have with people that are able to support me in different ways.
I feel like my kind of like social interaction and friend groups have really started to come together when feel like I've gotten to kind of like involve myself in kind of the parts of me that maybe I didn't get to indulge like first year and stuff. Like the arts was something that was missing for me like after my first year. Even like academics aside, it was like, I was very like, in some pre-professional things, like still figuring out my major at that time, but like the arts were kind of like a huge component that I had been involved with in high school and then didn't really know how to like make work for myself in college. But when I got involved kind of with the cinema and media studies minor, and I also was like a student coordinator for an opera, which was really cool my second year. And like once I felt like I was able to like round out myself, then my friendships kind of started to like fall into place. So kind of same thing as everyone's kind of said, like I've had some select friends, like a few people that I stayed close with from housing, a few people like that I've honestly met in classes that are now like my very, very best friends. And it was difficult, I think, for me to have those individual relationships and feel like I didn't have like a strong, like larger community. Everyone's different, right? Like it may work for you to like have your like close friends and have them like diversified or whatever. But for me, like that worked, but I also kind of felt myself wanting that community element. And like I said, the more I was able to kind of prioritize kind of what I wanted to be involved in and like being okay with that, then the community came, right? Like through RSOs and through like getting to know my friends' friends and things. So I think just the more you can like be very solid in what you're doing, what's making you happy, then naturally like the people that are also involved with those things will be people that like you'll probably gravitate towards like on some level. And then from there it's up to you to like decide, okay, like how social do you want to be? Like, do you want to prioritize this person or this relationship or like this group? And it kind of, I think like the more organically can happen, like the more like balance it's going to bring.
I'm on a sports team, so that is a good bulk of my social group, but even amongst that I have a few closer friends, and then a few closer friends outside of the sports team through classes, etc. As far as trying to keep socializing in college, there are certain things that you're just going to have to do. You're going to have to eat. You're going to have some form of caffeine, unless you're Superwoman or Superman, and which, you know, go you. You're going to take care of your body, so you're probably going to have to do some sort of yoga, running, anything, swimming, or at least pretend to do that, and just end up talking to your friend. But do those activities with a friend. And that's like a really easy way to make sure you're socializing. The harder times are, you know, being like, I'm gonna go out for a weekend, get a zip card, go apple picking. Those are harder to do, but make time for them. It will be better than sitting in a cubicle in the reg working on a paper. I can guarantee it, because the reg sucks. But that's my opinion.
Working silently next to one of your friends on the 5th floor of the reg is also a bonding activity, but like keep that, like you can't just do that. I live alone now, which means that I have to be very intentional about spending time with people. Like when I was in housing, you like don't have to think about it at all. You just go to the lounge and they're like people you want to hang out with there, like when you have roommates. But now that I live alone, one, it's great because if there are dishes in the sink, they're mine. But I also, if I want to do something on a Friday night, I have to text my friends like multiple days in advance. And I think that actually makes your friendships much stronger. So every single week I go to pub trivia with my friends, which you guys can't do yet, sorry. But it's amazing. Like we go every single week, and knowing that there are going to be 4 or 5 people that I see for like 2.5 hours every week is like, it's amazing. It's the like highlight of my week sometimes, and I always make time for it. And I think that's very important, that you just have to be really intentional about making sure that you see your friends at like, you know, however often you need to see them, and like, yeah, whether it's going out and doing something, having a meal, or just, yeah, like working sadly on the 4th floor at 11 p.m. on a Friday before they kick you out. That's how I've made my best friend here, is being kicked out of the reg on a Friday multiple nights in a row. So I would encourage you just to like focus on it and make sure it happens, and that's the best way to get it done.
I'm just going to jump back in. Logan said compartmentalizing, which is kind of how I defined my life for the first 2 years here. But then I realized that everybody actually knows everybody, which is like really wild when you first see people and you're like, how are you friends? Like, what do you possibly do? Like, you're in two such different parts of my life, and then you remember that like people have lives outside of their own interactions with you, which is like really wild. Object permanence, guys. And then like Angela said, friends of friends. Yeah, like the moment when you become like equally good friends with someone who's like you met through a friend, it's just so refreshing. It's so good. It's so good.
Other questions? Thanks for that question. Got a captive panel of students who've made it, more or less. Okay.
Wait.
2 more quarters, yeah.
I think that's actually good, you know, like playing off of that. I think that's probably, I don't know if you can hear me, like a really good thing to say. Like, right, we're 3rd and 4th years. We apparently look like we have our lives together. We're all sitting up here. None of us have any clue what we're doing. Promise. You will always feel underqualified. You will always think that you do not deserve to be in the room. Neither of those things are ever true. Like, if you have gotten your way into the room, you must have been doing something right to get there. You deserve to be with those people. Figure out what you did to get into the room and do more of that. Likewise, you will never have all of the skills you need for a job. Take that as a learning opportunity, right? Dive in, be willing and excited to do it, and then just recognize that no one else who applied had all the skills either. There's no that one perfect person that walks into a job and it's like, I know everything that I need to do on day one. There'd be no point in like you working that job if that was the case. So like, in 2 years you will also seem like you have your life put together. You probably seem like it now when the first years look at you, and you will feel just as like messy as we all do up here, if not more.
Okay, other questions? Okay, so I have one last question and then we'll just about be ready to move on. Resources, any bits of advice on things students should take advantage of? Whether it's, we've already talked about faculty and classes, so are there other resources on campus or even beyond that you'd recommend?
I can start. I don't know how many of you are still in housing, but I think it's a great resource to have, even if you're just an associate. So I'm an RA. I'm not being paid to say this, but but I really think it's a great resource because not only socially, personally, but academically as well. So something that we do is we match people up who would be willing to give help in certain classes and other people who might be willing to receive it. Just like this informal mentorship that we have going on is excellent. If we have someone who's thinking about switching their major, we're like, oh, we have 5 other people in the house who are in this major, so why don't you go talk to them over dinner at the house table? So just leverage your resources, talk to your RAs and your RHs. If you're not in housing, you can still reach back out to people in your house, be like, hey, remember me, we were in the same house first year, let's talk about your major if you're willing to do that, grab coffee or something. So this is just like a very intentional community that was created for you by the university, and it's a great way to meet people who have diverse academic interests, and you can use that to your advantage and really benefit from it.
And I would also add that for me, I think like my academic and career advisors were a great like first step in getting like kind of getting my hands on resources. I think like the more you can just like latch on to anything that comes your way, like even if that person or that kind of like organization or whatever may not be like giving you exactly what you'll need, like you'll meet people and then move on from there. The first time I met with my academic advisor, like I'm pretty sure she thought I was crazy. Like it was, we picked our classes like a week first year or whatever, and I just was like, I was a mess. Like she literally told me to calm down. Like, but like from there, you know, like I used her with any, like I feel like I was bombarding her with questions, but like she answered all of them and like I was able to move on, and then she's connected me since with like people that have gotten me involved with like Maroon Key Society, which is how I am on this panel. And it's like you kind of like whoever you meet, like I think if you really just take advantage of that relationship like in a way that benefits kind of what you need in the moment, like you're asking honest questions or you're trying to form like a really organic relationship, like that will like help you kind of then move forward. And same with like, you know, your career advisor. They're there, like if you have questions, like these are people that want to answer your questions. And the more questions you ask, like even if those answers aren't kind of the ones that are getting you where you need to be, like you will kind of forge relationships that will ultimately, you'll look back and be like, oh, I see how those all connected. So I think like a great first step is just like really like coming in and like utilizing, like those are 2 resources that are like available to you like at any time, like definitely use them.
Absolutely take advantage of all the different offices on campus, like the CCRF office, the Career Advancement office. Take advantage of all of that, but also take advantage of the person sitting next to you in class, the person in your house that you're friends with, because in the end, like you need your friends. Those are resources. It doesn't, when you think of resources, you don't immediately think of the 19-year-old person sitting next to you, but in a way, in so many ways, those are your greatest resources because they're the person, like they're the people with you every single day through it all. And so, like, don't forget that. Like, y'all are all each other's resources. We're each other's resources. We're back and forth, circle. Yeah.
I would say take advantage of student health and student counseling, because this is the only time in your life that you're going to get that for like cheap or free. Like get a free flu shot. You know, they do free like women's care and stuff like that. And once you go out in the real world, you're going to have to pay for that. But also particularly with the student counseling, like if you think you need it or think you might need it, I would encourage you to go sooner rather than later, see them or go see someone off campus. Like Sarah was saying, you know, you might feel like you're an imposter, you don't have your life together. I do feel like I have my life together, but that's because I put hours and hours of work into it over the past 3 years. So I would encourage you to get in there quickly if you think you might need it. That's the greatest resource I've had at the university.
And can I end, I guess, or
Right.
take a, sorry, my bad, yeah, of course. For me, the greatest resource would be Chicago, actually, the city of Chicago. So just literally, of course, there's a lot of resources to be had on campus, but there's tons of great volunteer opportunities off campus. With different kinds of populations. Go reach out and be ambitious and be courageous and be explorative. But also, in terms of fun, go to a Cubs game, White Sox game. I just came back from a Hawks game last night. They lost, but but yeah. So have fun, out there, and don't forget that you're in a beautiful city with a great, lake as well, and make use of it. Have a good time in college.
Plug for volunteering. You would be surprised what 30 minutes to an hour of focusing on someone else's needs will do for your mental health. There's a really good quote that says, it's very hard to feel melancholic if you are feeling useful, right? And of course, this doesn't apply to someone who is suffering from mental health issues, but if you're having just a really crappy week, getting out and just seeing that oh, I can make a small difference in a community really matters. For the past 2 years, I've worked at an LGBTQ+ drop-in center on Thursday nights. And that was just kind of the time where I knew that I was going to do something that was important, where I was going to do something that was necessary, and when I was going to do something that had no outright benefit to myself. It wasn't about me for this hour. And I think I still probably got more out of it than anyone, because it was kind of my space where I could heal and just have connections to people I wouldn't have gotten to have connections with otherwise. In kind of a less poetic note, please use the librarians at the library. They're wonderful. I guarantee you, no one's research skills are as good as theirs, whether you're trying to find sources for a paper, whether you're trying to do lit reviews for work. So much of your tuition money goes to paying for library resources, and they just go underutilized. They also break down the librarians by subject matter, so there is always someone who can help your specific field of research. And finally, many websites on this university list phone numbers. Be willing to use them. I don't know if that's an odd thing. I don't feel a lot of my friends call people on their phones, but you would be surprised how helpful people are when you get them on the phone. So, I do a lot of research. I submit for a lot of ethics reviews. If you don't have a background in an ethics review, you have no clue what you're doing. If you call them, they will tell you exactly what to do. This works the same way if you were trying to get transcripts sent somewhere. If you are having a problem with financial aid, the administrators at the school are incredibly kind, and if you can get someone on the phone, they will answer your questions and save you a lot of time. You would have spent writing emails and getting bounced between people.
Yeah, big plug for volunteering for me. That's how I have a full-time job, so volunteer somewhere. People will probably be nice to you because of it. Other than that, I definitely have a very weird collection of friends in resources and administrative positions. My advisor is also the deputy dean of students in the college, so he knows everything that's going on. So every time we meet, it's half about me and also half about the school. That's weird. I'm in a career cohort, careers and education professions, except I didn't do anything for a year, and then I walked into a meeting and my career advisor looked at me, he was like, oh, you're still in this. And I was like, Andy, what are you doing? But other than that, I'm now friends with Michelle Rasmussen, who's the dean of students in the university, to the point where we saw each other at the volleyball game on Friday, and she came up to me and gave me a hug. So all that is to say, people will actually be nice to you. They are terrifying. They are full-time jobs. They probably won't answer their email out of 9 to 5 business hours because they're adults and they respect themselves, unlike us. Or Nicole. Nicole always answers her email.
Don't advertise that. Only email Nicole between the hours of 9 and 5.
Yeah, that's healthy. Also, if you do that for yourself, that's also really healthy. Good luck to all of us. So you can be fun. And now why am I friends with Michelle Rasmussen? Because last year when they transferred the room booking system from whatever the old one was to the new one, it didn't work and I complained about it. And then that was it. We eventually got coffee and now she's like, oh, Andrew, what do you think about housing? And I'm like, well, I left housing after first year because the walls were yellow and it was too hot in Max. And she's like, well, that doesn't help me. I'm like, well, sorry. What do you want me to say? That's that. People will actually be nice to you. And thank goodness. Unless they're not, in which case, find a new friend.
All right, everyone. Quick announcement before we say thanks to our panelists. Those of you who are a part of SWAPNA's Your Major, Your Future panel, stay in this room. Dessert is out in the lobby, but they're going to turn the room around and you can come back in here for that particular session. Otherwise, workshops are scattered throughout IDA. If we could say a word of thanks to our panelists. Thank you very much.